Thank you very much. All right, I spent the last 2 days since I've arrived racking my brain how to squeeze a 4-hour presentation into 2 hours. It has not been easy. So I'm going to go through this at a pace, not because I want to confuse you or myself, but I feel like if I leave anything out, I feel like I'm robbing you of valuable content. And, what do you leave out of something that's a work in progress that started out, 8 years ago with a small little presentation and now consists of volumes and volumes of research and discovery that is, I, for one, certainly did not expect to happen to me. So let's kick off. The history of our planet is far more mysterious and stranger than most of us will ever realize. And just by talking to the people here, it becomes very evident. The more people you talk to at this conference, the more evident it becomes. And the interesting thing is that the closer you get to this beautiful blue planet, the more you realize how deeply divided we are as a species. And it's that division, very constructively created division, that is being used against ourselves. And this becomes very evident by the end of my presentation. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The great human puzzle. Who are we? Where do we come from? Why are we here? Everyone has asked those questions, the three Holy Trinity questions, if you can call them that. That sounds so simple. We should have all these answers at our fingertips, and yet we can't, define these answers with any kind of confidence, because every time we think we've reached some sort of answer, everything shifts and changes and sends us in a completely different direction. And I normally have a lot more slides here to go into much more detail, but I edited those out. Sound and resonance seem to be the common denominators of religion and creation. No matter how far back you go, no matter how many civilizations you look at, eventually, if you scratch deep enough, that's what you're going to find. Sound, resonance, frequency, but primordially the sound. And it also somehow connects us to opening us to understanding high levels of consciousness. And that becomes very important as we go through this presentation. In Christianity, it's the word. God said, let there be light. Okay, let's not get into the semantics. Yes, that we can define that in very various ways, but let's look at the basic stuff that we're dealing with here. The word. First there was the word. In Hinduism, we got the Om, the primordial creative source. The Egyptians sang the universe into creation. All comes to sound. And it gets more interesting as you look at some of the more bizarre and ancient cultures. And you can see this, how these days of creation and the sound of creation is manifested in some of the symbology used in sacred geometry. For example, Christianity can be very quickly described with sacred geometric principles. And you realize that the creator of the universe is not some guy with a white beard sitting on a cloud. That's just complete fairy tale stuff and very distinct part of the control system of humanity. That division principle plays itself out in that philosophy. 6 aspects of Om, or the Om Mani Padme Hum. You see sound frequencies related to the creation process. And in Egyptology, the 6 aspects of the all-seeing eye of Horus. And when you see this, you realize that we're dealing with sound, 6 resonance ratios, all to do with sound frequencies. So sound plays a very important role, and one of the lesser known statements or thought patterns of Nikola Tesla that a lot of people seem to miss is that Nikola Tesla said that the earth rings like a bell. It's continuously ringing like a bell. And if you know how to use this primordial source sound frequency of Mother Earth, you'll know how to convert it into an unlimited source of energy. And I believe that's what he really did. What he did with it up at the top of the tower remains a mystery to most of us, and we're all trying to emulate that. But I believe that he was talking about the sound of Gaia, an unlimited free source of energy. And this plays a very important part in all of creation, in all ancient cultures, in all the belief systems. And I believe Tesla used this to do whatever he did to create this free energy that we're all trying to emulate. But what is sound? What is sound? Because We think that sound is just something that travels at a finite speed. Well, that's been busted now, because in Tennessee, and you studied in Tennessee, didn't you, Brooks? At the Middle State Tennessee University in 2005, there were 3 high school students and 2 undergraduates that proved that sound travels beyond the speed of light. I'm not going to go into that, but that's an interesting thing to contemplate. That's one of the best kept secrets of science and physics. Never made it into the mainstream news bulletins. Sound boils water. This is a guy called Peter Davey in New Zealand. Since 1940, this guy's been boiling water with sound frequency. It's not complicated, because everything has a resonance. Everything in the creation and in physical form has its own fundamental resonant frequencies. If we understand the resonance and the sound behind the resonance, we can do everything. Because if sound created the universe and all things in it, because that was done by God, then we should be able to use sound to do everything else.
A 92-year-old Christchurch inventor claims to have come up with a novel way to make a cup of tea. He's invented a contraption that he claims uses the power of sound to boil water. Beverly Lockhart went to investigate.
It looks like a desk lamp, is cool to the touch and appears to be doing nothing until it comes into contact with water. 92-year-old former Spitfire pilot Peter Davey claims his invention uses the power of sound to boil water.
DSIR, they're a bit baffled how it works. Nobody really knows how it works.
Davey believes high-frequency sonic vibrations emitted from within the silver bulb cause the water to boil. He says the idea came to him 50 years ago when he noticed different saxophone notes caused different household items to rattle. The mains-powered gizmo has experts intrigued.
Never seen anything like it in my life, as they say.
Professor Williamson has his doubts about Davey's acoustic theory and suspects there are 2 simple electrodes inside the boiler.
It's the conductivity of the water that provides the path for the current and provides the resistance to give the heating.
I'm careful that I don't divulge everything. I'm waiting to get a manufacturer that's prepared to put some money into it.
And if he does get it on the shelves, he's already got one interested customer.
If I saw one in a shop, I'd buy one, because I think they're an interesting little bit of technology. However it is they work.
But for now, Davey is savouring his gizmo's success and sticking to his own unique theory on how it works. Beverly Lockhart, 3 News.
And in there lies the problem. He's dead. He took his secret to his grave. We will never find out until we go there, try and wrestle it out of his family to share the secret with the rest of the world. I can't believe that in all of the world of science and the the amazing laboratories that we have, there haven't been some scientists that have reverse engineered this or figured this out. Can't be that difficult. It's a resonant harmonic frequency of boiling water. Reverse engineer it. Measure the resonant harmonic frequency of boiling water and build the device. I don't have the laboratory to do it, but I've asked so many people to go out and do it, and no one's done it. So, but what we learn from this experience is we're here at this conference talking about free energy. I believe free energy means free to the world, not just free that we can suck it out of the vacuum and then sell it to the rest of the world. That's no longer free energy. I believe it's crucial that we start thinking about free energy as when you find it, like this guy, give it to the world for free. Because if you don't, they're going to get to you, they're going to get rid of you, and no one's going to get it. They were waiting. I can imagine what they did when Peter Davey died. They breathed a sigh of relief, say, oh, thank God he's gone. And he was too greedy to tell the world how the simple thing worked. Thank God this human greed gene is so powerful that it prevents people from sharing this beautiful stuff. That's what I have a problem with. So what I urge anyone here at this conference to do, if you do find something like this, a source of free energy, do not keep it to yourself. Do not try and gain from the rest of humanity. Put it on the internet, make videos, put it out as widely as you can, share it for free with the world. It'll come back to you in abundance that you can't imagine. Yes. Sound levitates. All ancient cultures talk about levitating things with sound. Not just sound, but also with mind and thought. Now, we hear about it all the time, but until you see something being levitated by sound, it's difficult to comprehend. Here's a beautiful example. Most of the stuff exists on YouTube, but we don't go looking for it. So, notice that you can hear the sound frequencies because the items they're levitating are very light. Remember, the higher the frequency, the higher the energy. So these polystyrene items are very light, so the frequency is lower frequency that's audible to our ears. So when you're trying to levitate giant blocks, you'd need very high frequencies that you can't hear, and then it looks like magic. Also note that the sound source comes from two different sound sources, and it seems to levitate it at the cross point, the crossroad of the sound frequencies. That's what the levitation effect is. This is very important later in my presentation. And the knowledge of the ancient cultures. Just the slightest sound variation and the thing starts to tumble and spin. Slightest little variation on the frequency. Look where it starts to spin. Real irritating noise, but you know, you have to put up with it too. So sound levitates. It's no longer, you know, this fairy tale thing. It really happens. But sound source is also the inspiration for all the religions in the world, the great religions, and the most recognized religious symbols. This is from the guys that developed the cymoscope. I normally show the cymoscope, but lack of time. So look at this 3D bubble that is created as sound. Remember, sound is a three-dimensional thing. From the pop, it goes in all directions. It's not a wave on a piece of paper. It's a three-dimensional effect that keeps amplifying itself and goes on and on and on. Just because you can't hear it anymore doesn't mean it's not necessarily there. So here's a three-dimensional bubble that's created at the sound, but look on the right-hand side at the cross-section of it. What do you see? You start seeing one of the most commonly recognized religious symbols. Why did the religions choose the symbols? Because when you drill right into the middle of this, what seems to be at the very source of sound, the pop, or that moment, instant of pop, this is what you get. Oh boy, do I recognize this interesting symbol. And this is where you realize when the ancient cultures carved these intricate things into rock, they weren't just imagining things. They understood that sound was the source and how sound can create and levitate and manifest shape and form. And that's why they carved hundreds of thousands of these crosses in circles. And not only did they carve it, but it's also recognized by ancient cultures. In southern Africa, it's known as Mabona, the Lord of Light. Lord of Light, sound and light, the creator of all things. The source of all things. And you see this shape repeat itself in some of the most popular religious symbols, like the Coptic and the pagan crosses. You see the sacred geometric patterns imitate themselves in these symbols. It becomes very interesting because now you know where they get the symbols from. It all comes from sound. What does this have to do with ancient civilizations and evolution of consciousness? Well, everything, because the ancient cultures understood this. They understood the process, they understood the source, and they used the source of sound as a source of energy. And this is what my discoveries show in South Africa. The resonating chambers for creation of energy, that's what the pyramids were. Many researchers are starting to reach that conclusion, that they were actually resonating cavities to create huge amounts of energy. And they would have looked something like this. What's also clear to me, the more research I do, especially at the sites in South Africa, realizing that we're dealing with sound and light, that they probably used light to activate some of these sound devices. They were actually resonating chambers, that it was activated by light. And this is why they were aligned with solstices and equinoxes with specific frequencies and energetic alignments of the movement of the sun that would activate these ancient sites and then bring them to life. Something like that. And if you think that's not happening, there's an interesting photograph that is available on the internet of some strange energy forms coming out of the pyramids, taken with some weird lens that shows you energetic frequencies. And this got me very excited because this is directly connected to my discoveries in the stone circles of southern Africa. This is some interesting symmetrical interference patterns that were taken at Stonehenge, which tells us that Stonehenge was not an accidental bunch of, long-haired, loincloth, cavemen that built this with ropes and pulleys. And when you go to Stonehenge, they still have that image on the side of the tunnel as you walk towards Stonehenge. They still show the guys with ropes and pulleys building Stonehenge. It's insane. So it's a very, very advanced device, Stonehenge. And what blew my mind is how old Stonehenge is. This is probably one of the oldest sites on Earth. It's probably more than 1 million years old. Are there any geologists here? Any geologists? Well, most of you are homemade geologists. So. You're told that that stone there fell over. It was the twin of that stone, and it fell over. Right? They were connected at the top, and it broke when it fell over. Well, there's the break. Okay? Now, this is sarsen stone. It's very, very hard. One of the hardest stones known to us. There's the break. Does that look like a 5,000-year-old break and erosion? Absolutely not. We're dealing with hundreds of thousands, probably millions of years of erosion to erode about this far. This is not a new structure, people. Stonehenge is extremely old. Your mother will lie to you, your priest will lie to you, but the geology is not going to lie to you. There it is. Do with this what you want. It tells us we're dealing with ancient sites and advanced knowledge of sound frequency, because we see it in the patterns that the Stonehenge site still generates today, even though it is in the state of disrepair. Just like the stone circles in South Africa, in the incredible state of disrepair, are still giving us insane amount of energy that we don't know what to do with. This is another example of how old Stone Age is. That crack was clearly not there when the builders built it. You wouldn't put a lintel up with a crack in it. So we have to assume the crack happened after the event. And look at the erosion around the crack. I mean, this is insane amount of erosion. So, modern day levitator. Southern Florida, this guy called Ed Leeds Cullen in the 20s built this amazing place called Coral Castle. This is still a mystery to a lot of people, or they don't know about it. And he single-handedly put these giant blocks on top of each other, carved them, sculpted them, shaped them on his own. The interesting thing is when they used to bring the trucks used to deliver these rocks, he would offload them single-handedly. And nobody knew how he did it. He always made the guy stand around the corner or something like that, until one day 2 young schoolboys saw him offloading these giant coral blocks. And they came home very excited saying, "Hey, Mummy, we saw the guy." And they asked, "How did he do it?" And the kid said, "Well, he did it with ice cream cones in his hands, 2 ice cream cones." And the parents imagined, naughty children, what are you talking about? You're trying to force us into buying your ice cream for dinner, right? Well, that's not true. When I heard that, I got extremely excited, because that is consistent with what I've been finding in southern Africa. Ice cream cones, cone-shaped tools. And that's why I call it the ice cream cone phenomenon. And this has become a very important part of trying to unravel the ancient mystery, how they did this stuff. They used sound, they levitated stuff, but how did they do it? And I find many of these cone-shaped tools scattered all over southern Africa, among the ruins, wherever you go. I was up the mountain 2 weeks ago, again, walking through areas that I've never been before. Remember, at this stage, I'm the only guy researching this, the whole of southern Africa. It's like I'm the only guy researching Egypt. That's the equivalent of that. Is one guy in all of Egypt let loose to do, try and get some sanity out of this. And so I feel a little lonely, so come help. So just to show you that these ice cream cone-shaped tools are everywhere. There are thousands of them. I've just collected a few, because after a while you get bored. Say, oh, there's another one over there. And then you get to the Rosicrucian Museum in the United States, and guess what I find? These cone-shaped tools on display with Sumerian writing on it, Sumerian cuneiform writing on it, commemorating the building of the temples in Sumer. They were then stored in the walls and hidden in secret chambers in the walls that were retrieved from the secret chambers in the walls. Now they're on display in the United States. Cone-shaped tools commemorating the building of the temples in Sumer. The plot thickens, doesn't it? So let's go back to South Africa, or Southern Africa. The current belief system is that Southern Africa was a sparsely populated part of the world with only a few inhabitants up to about 1,000 years ago. And they tell you about maybe 5,000 people, maximum 10,000 people, hunter-gatherers running around, shooting a buck here, shooting a buck there. Well, they don't do their homework when they put this in our history books, and they insult our intelligence, because unfortunately the ancient stone ruins of Southern Africa tell us a completely different tale. But they still continue to put in our history books, still today, that these are just cattle kraal for keeping cattle. These amazing stone structures that cover most of Southern Africa. But they didn't know that it covered most of Southern Africa, so they put these ignorant things into our history books. And then we pay lots of money to send our children to university to regurgitate this crap. Right? And it's spectacular. They just make the stuff up, put it in the history books, but because they doctor this and doctor that, everybody just kisses their butt and nobody questions them. It's really sad, but just to show you what some of these structures look like, I'll go through these rapidly. They are really remarkable structures. And the walls are not very high. Sometimes they're flat with the ground. Some places they're 3 meters tall or 2.5 meters high. The most important thing that you need to notice is that each one is completely unique and different. There are not two that are even closely, remotely the same. Each one is completely unique. Now that was a question that wasn't asked until I came along. What you also need to look at is the stuff around the obvious structures, not the structures themselves, because you'll see that there's a lot of stuff around the structures that is hidden by soil. It's not visible to you unless you're up in the air, like you're looking at from this vantage point. Otherwise, you don't even know it's there. You walk through the veld, you have no idea you're walking over ruins. And then when you look at it on Google, you say, oh my goodness, I was walking there, and I was walking right through all these ruins and these terraces. I didn't even know it while I was walking there. And this is the awakening that happens. I mean, let me just go back here. I mean, look at this horseshoe-shaped structure here, attached with a circle inside it, with a stone right in the middle of it, with these weird two, like, towers that lead you in there. And this arm of this from the center goes right through the middle of this. There's some weird stuff going on here that we don't understand. Look at all this stuff hidden by soil underneath, around this obvious ruin here. There's another horseshoe-shaped, ohm-shaped structure. And what does ohm represent in modern electronics and electricity? It's linked to vibration, frequency, the movement of current, and so forth. Resistance. Look at all the stuff in between, covered by soil. You have no idea that there's much more of this stuff in between, connecting this one to that one. And then they build beautiful flower-shaped stone structures because they look like pretty flowers, right? Except you can only see it from the air. And they're all connected by these channels. There's a channel coming out of it and a channel running down there that's badly destroyed, and these strange hexagonal shapes. What is activity all about in Southern Africa? Always about gold. Don't you ever forget it. Always about gold. And remember, it's not the obsession of humans with gold, it's the God's obsession with gold. In Genesis 2, when Adam was alone on earth, Eve had not yet been fashioned from his rib. God comes to Adam and says, hey buddy, there's a place called Havilah. It's land full of milk and honey. The land is good, the water is good. And by the way, buddy, there's gold. What on earth is going on here? Why would God, the creator of the universe and all things in it, the commander of consciousness, want to tell Adam about gold? And it's in that one defining moment that you divide God with a big G from God with a small g. Huge, huge division. The twain shall never meet. And the Bible and ancient texts seem to be, especially the Bible, is constantly crossing those lines. What I find fascinating, scholars that have been studying the Bible for 30 years, their entire life, still keep crossing that line. God with a big G, God with a small g. The Elohim is a plural. The Elohim and the Annunaki are the same beings, and I'll show you why. We've got conclusive evidence that the Annunaki and the Elohim were the gods of the Bible, the gods with a small g, the malicious, malevolent beings that were after gold. The divine creator of all things does not want gold. He doesn't take credit cards, and he doesn't use money. And we'll get to that. The ancient history of Southern Africa is all about gold. You can't, the whole Monomotapa kingdom that was attacked by everybody from the north, and they could never be overthrown, the golden kings of Monomotapa. Fascinating story. Not many people are even aware of it. What do other ancient cultures or other ancient texts tell us? Well, the Sumerian tablets tell us in great detail about the Anunnaki. And all the great biblical stories are first found in the Sumerian tablets in much greater detail. And when they, like the creation of Eve from Adam's rib, is reduced to 2 lines in the Bible. In the Sumerian tablets, it's a whole chapter on it, how it happened, how they put Adam into a deep sleep, and blah, blah, blah. It's phenomenal information. But so what we do know is that a lot of the stories in the Sumerian tablets are translated into the Bible much later and abused or used for abuse against humanity. Work in the Abzu is the constant reference in the Sumerian tablets. Abzu has been given many names, but its primary sort of reference is always linked with gold. This is Abzu is where the gold came from, and there's some great references from Sitchin's work where the landmass, the shape of a heart was given, in the lower parts thereof golden veins from the earth's innards were abundant. Abzu, of gold the birthplace, Ea to the region the name gave. And I'll draw that comparison for you to show what he's talking about. The Sumerian god Enki is inextricably linked to Southern Africa and the gold mining empire. And in my longer presentations I go into more detail why I say this, but it's just overwhelming. It keeps coming in waves and waves, how Enki is linked to Southern Africa and the gold mining empire that he set up there some 400,000 years ago. Now, Enki is not unknown in African ancient history. Creator Mutwa told me that Enki is known as Enkai, the creator of the human race. Just to throw that at you. And it gets weirder and weirder the deeper you go into this. And then Enki decides to create a species because they needed help to get the gold out of the mine. You can't just use machines. Machines break. And it's much easier to clone a species and train them and let them do this stuff, because if they die or get sick, then you just replace them. It's better than building machines. They just breed on their own. Look what they've done. 7 billion. Great breeders, these machines, these slaves. Let us create a Lulu, a primitive worker. The hardship work to take over. Let the being, the toil of the Anunnaki carry on his back. Tells us very clearly what these guys were up to down there. Planning to create the Adam, Adamu. A primitive worker shall be created. Our command will he understand. Our tools he will handle. To the Anunnaki in the Abzu relief shall come. So we know that the Anunnaki were in the Abzu. They were doing something. They needed relief. And for this they needed a slave, and they cloned it. And boy, did they do a good job. This is fantastic reference to Enki's house, his mines, and his technology. In the midst of the Abzu, to a place of pure waters, Enki betook himself. In that land, a place of deepness he determined for the heroes into the earth's bowels to descend. Before they cloned the slaves or the human race, they referred to the Anunnaki who were doing the gold mining as the heroes, because they were doing the hard work in the gold mines. So for the heroes into earth's bowels to descend. The earth splitter that Enki established. Now I'm going to show you the earth splitter because this is one of my discoveries in South Africa. Therewith in the earth a gash to make, by way of tunnels, earth's innards to reach, the golden veins to uncover. Boy, now that we found the physical evidence in South Africa and Zimbabwe, mostly, suddenly Sitchin's work becomes like poetry, because we can point to what he's referring to. We've got the physical evidence for which he's often undergone a lot of criticism, Oh, he's making this stuff up. Well, anyone who's still a naysayer about Sitchin's work, wake up. We got the physical evidence. It's there in beyond believable abundance. Is there a ruin or a settlement that could be linked to Enki? Absolutely. And this is Great Zimbabwe, the greatest ruin in southern Africa. It has to be the biggest, right? This is just a spectacular place. And just to show you, some of the walls are 10 meters high and 6 meters wide. Great Zimbabwe is a spectacular sight. And it has got Enki's energetic imprint all over it. Any of you that do energetic work, go and look at it. You're not going to believe your eyes. What's so special about the ruins in southern Africa? Well, they're very special cattle kraal for very special cattle, because this is probably where the word holy cow comes from. Because most of these cattle kraal are built aligned to the sun and the stars and the equinoxes and the solstices, and wow, they went to a lot of trouble for these cattle, didn't they? And the sacred geometry, and you start seeing how sacred geometric principles just jump out of these structures, and you realize, hold on, this is not just somebody building things, to pass time. And clearly this was easy to these people, because every single one of these ruins that is measured, and this is all Jan Heine's original pioneering work, for which you'll always be remembered, because every ruin that he's measured so far turns out to have these very intricate alignments. And this is spectacular. And you'll understand why this is so spectacular when you realize how many of these ruins there are. These, look at this, they're perfect, and you draw a circle over there, which doesn't look like it's real. But when you extrapolate that flat line into the circle, you get a perfect hexagon. When you start joining the corners of the hexagon, look how it touches the inner circle perfectly. This is not accidental, people. This takes real exact science and understanding. There you go. So these structures down there are not just simplistic structures. They carry huge amounts of energy. And important to note that there are no doors or entrances. This is an important thing that you find in some of the archaeological reports, and they say, oh, there are no doors and entrances, and then they forget about it. And then they tell you, it was probably built by a migrating group of 15 to 20 people, and they built it. And you say, hold on, you just told me there are no doors and entrances, and now you're telling me that it was built by people as a dwelling. So what's going on here? What are we dealing with here? And you don't get intelligent answers from the so-called authorities on this. And agricultural terraces. Thousands of kilometers of agricultural terraces. In fact, more than 450,000 square kilometers of agricultural terraces in a sparsely populated part of the world. Who built these terraces? What were they planting in these terraces? What's going on here? It doesn't fit. It doesn't match. Terraces are everywhere. When you start looking and opening your eyes, mountains are covered by these terraces. This is in Botswana. This is in Lesotho. There are terraces up some of the most incredible steep mountain sides that don't make any sense. In fact, if you go into Google Earth and you look at Lesotho, I challenge you to find any part of Lesotho without terraces. It's actually quite incredible. There are just terraces everywhere. And there's just been no people down there to build these terraces, so where do they come from? This is one of the greatest examples, because you can see the channels that link them, the circles and the terraces, all one giant grid. Nothing stands alone. Remember I told you, look at around the circles, the stuff hidden by the soil, because there are no standalone circles. They're all part of a giant grid, a huge grid. No standalone, all connected by these weird channels that are clever people at university call roads to drive the cattle on. This is why these roads are there, because they were built because the people 200 years ago built them to drive their cattle on. And that's as far back as they go. Maybe 400 years ago, that's it. This is just spectacular. This is right up the road from where I live. So when I leave my house and I go walking in the mountains, this is what I walk in these places. And it's rather silly. So I take a lot of photographs and I write a whole bunch of stuff, and then I come talk to people like you, and I feel like I'm, alone, lost in the world. Ancient roads and channels run for hundreds of miles. Notice, circle, channel, and the extrapolation or the extension of the circle that looks like a giant spider's web. And it's these giant spider's web that turn into these agricultural terraces. And there's a very specific reason why this is all connected, which you'll understand soon. Look at these archaeological drawings from 1939, clearly showing us that there are no doors and entrances, and these circles are all connected like a bunch of grapes. And then they don't make any more comments about it, they just leave it. The roads link every stone circle. There's the road there. It's very, very badly eroded, as you can see. Most of the times you don't even know you're walking on these ruins. Over there at the bottom, it used to connect in there, but that looks like water washed it away at some stage. Look at this linking into these strange hexagonal things. There's not enough time to talk about that, but there's spectacular information about what is going on there. And there's ruins there and there, but they're just covered by soil. This is a beautiful example of a channel running into with all the stuff around it. The spider's web effect. Look at this. Now imagine most of southern Africa looking like this a long, long time ago. And these are all cattle kraal, as I said, built for special cattle. There were a lot of cattle. Boy, they were just, I don't know where the people were, but there are a lot of cattle. Hey, maybe... How many of these ruins are there. And this is where the penny really drops, when you start figuring out how many there were. In 1891, the brilliant Theodore Bent, this is one of the few archaeologists that I carry real respect for, wrote a brilliant book, The Vanished Lost Cities of Mashonaland. And it's a phenomenal book. And in 1891, from horseback, traveling through South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, he estimated about 4,000 of these structures. Then by 1974, Roger Summers, who had more technology available, calculated about 20,000 of these stone ruins. Now, by now, I started going, hold on, 20,000 stone ruins in a sparsely populated continent doesn't make any sense. I got involved in 2007 when Jan Heine introduced me to this, and within 6 months, I estimated at least 100,000 ruins. So I thought, well, before I release Temples of the African Gods, I can't just thumbsuck the stuff. Let me have some sort of at least scientific argument for this. So I started counting. I used Google and aerial shots and just started counting, and extrapolating, getting averages per hectare, per square kilometer, per larger area. And I went all over southern Africa and found these densely clustered areas and got averages. And some of the aerial photographs looks like, there's circles here. When you look closer at it, when you study this, you see how connected they were. This is all over southern Africa. Some of them are in the Transvaal or in Gauteng, what used to be the Transvaal, in Mpumalanga, in the Orange Free State. There's some in Natal, KZN. I just found some in KZN 2 weeks ago when I traveled to KZN. And I hadn't found any before. So wherever you go, you find more ruins. Zimbabwe, Botswana, as I mentioned. And this one I'll be talking about again. This is near a town called Bronkhorstspruit, very strange looking structures. This is again close to my house. And this is south of Johannesburg. There are thousands and thousands of these south of Johannesburg, and they think they discovered gold there in the late 1800s. And this is just spectacular. It's the density of these. This is other side of Rustenburg, where I grew up near the platinum mines on the way to Botswana. This runs about 5 by 5 kilometers, and it's just dense like this. It's ridiculous. And this is back near where I live, just to show you the circles with the channels connecting them and the terraces. And by the time I finished counting, getting all these averages, I found out there were more than 10 million of these. So forget 4,000 and 20,000 and 100,000, more than 10 million of these. In fact, I can now tell you categorically it's probably closer to 20 million of these. And we'll be surprised if there aren't more. It's spectacular. We're dealing with the largest and most mysterious ancient civilization on earth that no one's paid any attention to until now. What happened to them? What happened to 10 million stone structures and the people? Forget the stone structures. We've got evidence of those. Where are the bones? Where are the dead people? There's nothing. Not a trace of who occupied these. Isn't that more mysterious in itself? That for an extended period of, I'll show you, about 280,000 years, people lived and worked here. Then no fossil remains of these people. What on earth went on here? This is where you start listening to people like Drunvalo Melchizedek, when he says that, human populations have been evacuated and moved from one planet to another. You go, well, hold on, suddenly that makes a little bit more sense than anything else. Because we should have found bones. There's been a lot of digging, mining, and there should be bones everywhere. Farmers, building houses. So what happened to them? This is where the Sumerian tablets become very important. And the King's List, I'm going to come back to this, because in the two King's Lists that give us exactly the same story, they give us the names of 8 kings that ruled for about between 220 and 241,000 years. The names of the kings are the same, the places they ruled are exactly the same. The dates vary a little bit. So you've got to allow some, mistakes in translation. But the names and places remain the same. This is very, very interesting. But what this tells us is 2 very important things that I'm going to come back to later. And this is a repetitive theme in the Sumerian text. Is after the kingship descended from heaven to earth, after kingship was lowered to earth from heaven. Okay, to us it doesn't make any sense. Oh, we think it's some crap made up by the ancient people because they were all stupid, right? And then it tells us who these kings were and how long they lived. And you can clearly see that they weren't human, because they lived and ruled for 36,000 years, 64,000 years, 28,000 years. And then a very important thing that it tells us, a very important statement from these 2 kings lists. And then the flood swept over. So two very important things, three important things. That kingship was lowered to earth from heaven. Somebody up there decided that they were going to appoint some kings on earth, some priest kings. That changes all of human history. It tells us that they ruled for an extended period of time, and then the flood came. So we seem to have a history, a chronology of human history until the flood. Prior to this, or until now, we know very little about what happened before the flood. And this is very important. So I believe that when they say the flood came, that's what destroyed these ruins. Some 12 to 13,000 years ago, the so-called Great Flood that there's not much argument about in geologic and archaeological circles. And you can see the sedimentation. That's why most of these ruins are not visible. Most of them are covered by soil. They're hidden from us. And wherever there's stone circles, there are gold mines. You can't get away from it. More than 75,000 gold mines have been found between 2005 and 2010 in a geological survey just around the little town of Leidenburg in Mpumalanga province. 75,000 gold mines. In the 30s, I've got two distinct, separate reports from two separate miners that mined in the province of Limpopo, northern South Africa, that found mysterious mine shafts, tunnels like this, at about 100 feet down while they were mining gold. Remain unexplained. Tools and artifacts were confiscated by the authorities, never to be returned. In the 1990s, De Beers found a mine shaft 22,000 feet deep that scared them. That they said was cut with absolute precision, indicated some advanced laser technology that they do not possess. Anglo-American, I know, has a secret file that they keep for covering up ancient mines and shafts. Anytime they come across an ancient shaft or a mine, they cover it up and move on. They don't even discuss it, but they have a specific file for that. And I was told this by the chief geologist, the Anglo-American, while we were having a beer at a pub. He just volunteered this information to me. I was amazed. But then he didn't know who I was or what I was doing. Sneaky bastard. What kind of stone are we dealing with here? It's a very special kind of stone. It's known as hornfels. And it's known by geologists as ringstone. And I was the first person, I'm astounded, the first person to ask what kind of stone was used to build these ruins. They just, don't go there. And it's metamorphosized quartzite. It's incredibly hard. You can't break it, people. I've tried to break some of these. This sliver is a break I keep in my museum. This happens as a result of heat. You expose it to fire, it breaks up. So clearly they didn't use fire in any of these ruins. Otherwise there'd be none left. As you can see, it's black on the inside, very hard, and then it's got this stuff called patina, the skin, like a skin that grows. It's a oxidization and calcification process. It grows incredibly slowly on this specific rock. And what is fascinating about this hornfels stone is that it conducts sound incredibly well. It rings like a bell and light. There's some more examples that I found that I keep in the museum. And more spectacular examples. And just to show you, there's a little... The most remarkable artifacts that I've collected, this particular stone in my hand here, this beautiful Stone Age club, it looks like something out of Flintstones. I'm going to show you how they ring like bells, because I can't carry these with me all over the world. So a quick demonstration how these stones ring like bells. I just discovered that in geological terms, these stones, this particular stone, the hornfels in South Africa, is also known as ringstone for that very specific reason. And to ring these, I'm going to use my brand new tool that I've just collected about a week ago. This phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal artifact. And I'm going to use this to ring these stones. This looks, we always joked when I found this, that this looks like a Stone Age guitar. And it's pretty much like that, And I'm going to show you that it is very closely related to a musical instrument in ancient times for very specific reasons. Now you might think that the stone shape is just accidental and that it broke off or something. You'd be mistaken, because I've collected probably about 4 or 5 stones that are very, very similar in shape, very similar carving structure. There's broad base here and then down to a narrow tip, and somebody removed this particular piece of the stone over there for specific reasons, as you will hear, which I'll ring a little bit more. They ring like bells. But it's also important to note that you cannot carve or chip this stone. it will splinter and fragment, and it will not be chipped or carved. Okay, so these shapes that we see here must have been molded in some way, and molded for specific acoustic properties. And this is why. You've got to hold it a very specific way to make as little contact as possible to get it to ring and resonate at its optimum. Now remember, it's also covered in patina, the skin of the rock, this brown reddish color that covers the rock, that is no longer the original black or charcoal color, the original color of the metamorphosized quartzite that's underneath. And that's how it rings. I can actually feel my fingers underneath are deadening the ringing because I'm holding it and it's deadening some of the effect. There we go. That's better. That's what you want. You realize that this thing really rings like a bell and it reverberates for quite a long time. Alright, and now to show you that this is not the only one, here's the other one. The Stone Age Club. And I drove over this myself a few times, driving up the mountain of the forest road, and eventually I stopped and picked it up because I realized this is one of the most remarkable tools that you will ever find, and thank God I did. And it is very heavy. I'm out of breath because I'm holding my breath not to make a noise, and this thing weighs probably about 15 kilos, so and there you go. Demonstration how these stones ring like bells, and they were used in all kinds of ways and fashions, just like the ankh, to create specific vibrational frequencies and specific notes to use as a form and a source of energy. And just to remind you, metamorphosized quartzite is full of what? So we can talk about this later, when we start getting into the consciousness principles. What are we really dealing with here? And what do these ancient sites contain? How much information is actually stored in these ancient sites? Yes?
Just a quick question with the stones there. I noticed that the frequency was the same. It seemed to be the same note. Did you actually ever try and measure the exact frequency?
Yes, we did. We measured. Well, not those two. I haven't tested those two. But somebody emailed me. I get thousands of emails. Somebody emailed me saying that's a B flat, I think. That is very important, but it's just not enough time to go through all the stuff. Sorry. And then all these anomalous tools I've been collecting and finding. Strange tools. Once again, some of them are these cone-shaped tools, always to these points. And then the stone phallus. Stone phalluses seem to be very popular in these ancient times. What's important to note, see how the patina has covered all of them, remember? Somebody must have carved them or shaped them at some stage. And they're all covered in this brown patina. Okay, keep that at the back of your mind. This is at top of the big ruin on top of the mountain there. That's spectacular, whatever that is, a bird-shaped stone, or there's a whole other link to the Zimbabwe birds that is in here, but we can't go there. These strange tools and artifacts that are just spectacular, that make no sense to us today, because it's not part of normal archaeological, stuff that they exhibit. And then the most spectacular mystery in all of archaeology, the sacred stones. The special sacred stones. Hundreds of thousands have been found in southern Africa. Now, because we had a breakthrough energy conference, you'll automatically notice that they resemble a torus shape. So I'm giving you a little hint as to what these are for. But in South Africa, the Archaeological Society has it as a logo, and they will still teach you that these are weights for digging sticks. That the people made them in the hundreds of thousands, when there were only a few thousand hunter-gatherers, because this is from the Stone Age, right? So there were no metal tools. They made this with other stones because they needed weights for their digging sticks when they were digging for roots in the veld. I can't think of anything more insane. These people should be locked up. Where's the flagship among all these ruins? And this is where we get to the very important Adam's calendar. It was rediscovered in 2003 by Johann Heine, and he'll always be remembered for that, because this is one of the most spectacular discoveries in all of human archaeological history. These are the two central calendar stones. Baba Kreda Mutwa, the preeminent African shaman, told me when I saw him, there you can see Adam's calendar, my other book lying on the desk. When I showed him this book, he burst into tears and took quite a while to calm himself down. He said he never thought he'd see that sacred place again. He was initiated at this place in 1937 as a young shaman, and he calls it Inzalo Yelanga, or birthplace of the sun. Specifically the S-O-N, not S-U-N, because it is believed by the shaman that this is where the gods created humanity. Birthplace of the sun. That's what it looks like from a helicopter. Circular structure, that is north, that is south, not the trees, the stones under the trees. They're the two central calendar stones, and over there you see a wooden pole. That's where the stone man used to stand, and right from the stone man across there, across the Horus bird lying there, which you'll see, we're looking east, exactly east at the rise of the sun. On the edge of this cliff, which is known as the Transvaal Escarpment. There's looking north, exactly north, between the two stones. You can see north-south line goes right between the two central calendar stones. And why is it a calendar? This is Johann Heine showing me of our very first visit there, why it's a calendar. And he did all the original calculations when he rediscovered it. This setting sun casts a shadow, this rock casts a shadow on this one, and you can tell every day of the year, from the summer solstice on this side until the winter solstice on that side, and it comes back. So it's still an accurate calendar, and one of the few that I know. I can't think of any others that do this, monolithic calendars or Stone Age calendars. This is a 3D reconstruction that we did, putting the stone man back in his place, who was removed in 1994 by the Minister of Environmental Affairs, to put a plaque on it to commemorate the opening of the Blue Swallow Nature Reserve. Isn't that ironic? Desecrating one of the oldest sites on Earth. And then they try and prevent us going there because we're bringing tourists there and we're desecrating the place. And there you have, looking out east from the stone man across the calendar stones, very distinct Horus stone, looking at what? 3 stones that seem to align with those pyramidal structures over there, that are aligned with the rise of Orion over there. But you'll see more about that now. How do we date the stones? We look at everything. I'll look at anything, because you can't date stones. So you got to look at everything. Use your, do what the guys in CSI do. Follow the clues and the evidence. And what makes most sense, you have to go with that. So first of all, every stone there is known as dolerite. It doesn't belong there. It is now categorically proven and shown from geological studies that those stones do not belong there. They were brought there by somebody to build the calendar site. That's the edge of the Transvaal Escarpment. It's known as Black Reef Quartzite, and it's full of gold. There's a gold mine underneath that ridge, actually, an ancient gold mine. The erosion, that piece there broke off there. That's the erosion on the tip of that ridge, on the break. Most geologists I've asked suggested to me, pick a number above 50,000 years for the amount of erosion that happened there. So 50,000 years ago, that piece broke off and landed there. Right? So now we're starting to get to the ancient age of this. But this is one of my best, is the patina growth, because I've told you already that these tools have been molded and shaped, and the patina has grown back. That's what it looks like when the patina is gone, black, and then the patina grows back. This is a great example of a monolith in one of the stone walls that at some point broke, and this tip broke off. Look at the patina that's grown back. There's about 2 millimeters of patina growth. We're dealing with something. This patina is known to grow at about 1,000 years per microscopic layer. 1,000 years per microscopic layer. So for a millimeter or 2 millimeters of patina, we're dealing with something that's 100, 200, 300,000 years old. We don't really have a measure for it, but it's extremely old. And we know that this is not normal archaeology. Look at this beautiful carving of one of the stone structures. So not only did they build the stone circles, but they first carved them into rock. This is another interesting part of this presentation that I normally go into a lot more detail. But look at, after they carved this crack appeared through the rock. This hornfels stone, you should see the black of the hornfels on the crack. On a fresh crack, you'll see the black of the hornfowls. But it's so old that the patina has grown into the crack and completely covered up the black color. So this shows us how old this carving is. So we're dealing with probably 50 to 100,000 years old that this carving is. So these are the kind of indicators that we have to use when you deal with this kind of evidence, because you can't follow the normal archaeological routes. They just don't have the tools to do that. But this, my friends, is by far the most important discovery, I believe. If you look at the circular, you can see the whole Adam's calendar is a circular structure, north-south. But the first thing that you notice is that it's not at 12 o'clock. It's not true north. It's slightly left of center. So Jan Heine and I had it measured, and we found out that there's a 3 degrees, 17 minutes, and 42-second deviation anti-clockwise. Now, that's not possible, because we're not dealing with magnetic north. We're dealing with true north. And at first, we thought that this had something to do with the precessional wobble. So I spent a lot of months trying to analyze and speak to experts in precessional counting and all that. And I realized, hold on, I'm barking up the wrong tree. This is true north. Wherever you are in the precessional wobble, true north stays at true north, right? So what's going on here? This is 3¼ degrees deviation. I believe that the man that holds all the information is Charles Hapgood, who's been trying to teach us about crustal displacement and crustal shift. I believe that Adam's calendar is a real geophysical example that crustal shift displacement did happen, because these guys did not make mistakes. They would not have accidentally built at 3¼ degrees out of alignment. It's not going to happen. So, we know that crustal displacement happened, we just don't know when. But here we have physical, geophysical evidence that it did occur. And then obviously the Orion connection. You can't get away from the Orion connection. All ancient cultures do it. I've mentioned it already, those three. There's your Horus stone, and look at that distinctly carved rock there. Those three, if you lift them up, they align precisely with the rise of Orion's belt when it was flat on the horizon. I've had two separate calculations done by two separate astronomers. Both of those will be wrong, because none of them took into account that 3¼ degree misalignment. So, but it just shows you that their calculations are really, really old. That's really interesting. I didn't cross-examine on them. And just to show you this beautiful Horus stone, I discovered that one morning when I went there with another guy, very, very early when I started doing this exploration. And that stone was covered by soil. So we couldn't see. I didn't know that it was actually a Horus or a bird-shaped stone. But then when I moved the soil away from about there, suddenly